talking on the rise of the data integrator. You know, this is wonderful times. Now, let me say from a personal perspective, I was really excited to teach this class, teach this webinar. The reason is I'm a DBA by background. But I'll tell you what, in doing so, as we go to begin, again, let me welcome you. This is our one slide that does any advertising. So I promise you I'll be off it in about 30 seconds and show it to you again at the end. But what I'd like to say is that this particular webinar webinar series is offered on a monthly basis, and it's free to all those who have signed up. You'll see on the screen here that on March 11th, we have our next one in our management training series, and that's Cloud Computing's Role in the Golden Age of the Business Analyst. So as you'll see in this, as we talk about big data and the other IT megatrends, not only is it good for DBAs and others related to data, it's also great for business analysts, but actually for any project managers that we also have on the line. And then we have one in April called Can Social Media Get You Promoted or Fired? You bet it can. And we'll be talking about sort of all the ins and outs related to that with social media, even to the point of, wow, something's out there that you can't get off. What do? You've just lost a job or not been able to get a job because of it. And also the other side of the coin is how you can use it to your advantage to help build your professional brand. From there, I'd also like to touch, we have our ITMLP, which stands for Information Technology, Management and Leadership Executive. It's a 3-day intensive class on IT leadership for seasoned IT managers. And in April, what we have on the 15th through 17th, by the way, the 15th, that means the tax day is coming up if we're advertising it here, is we have our ITMLP, which is Management Leadership Professional, which is those who are senior individual contributors / management wannabes, to those with 3 or 4. This is me. My name is Eric Bloom, and I'm your host today in today's webinar. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank New Horizons for setting up today's webinar and actually being our sponsor. So thank you to Anthony if you're on the line, and thank you to anyone else from New Horizons who happens to be listening. Again, my name is Eric Bloom. I'm a CIO by background. I started my career as a, going to date myself here, as a DEC 10 assembly language programmer and a COBOL programmer, moved up through the management ranks to CIO role. I've, over my years, been a business analyst. I've been a DBA, actually, for any DBAs on the line. Dare I say it was for versions of Oracle 3 and 4. But in addition to that, I'm also a adjunct research advisor for IDC, which specializes in, my specialty is IT staffing strategies, talent management, and organizational design, or specifically IT organizational design. I'm also a nationally syndicated columnist with Gatehouse Media. I'm in about 250 newspapers a week, give or take, on general management columns. I write for IT World Magazine, and my column is Your IT Career. In fact, I'm right off the homepage on there at itworld.com. I'm a professional coach, and I'm the president-elect of National Speakers Association, New England. So now, why you all came here? Let's begin the content of today's webinar by saying, hey, you know what? All right, fine. We're saying that it's the rise of the DBA and the data integrator. Why? Well, the reason is shown on the screen right here, and we'll be going through each of these individual items and the role that it plays to the advantage of, I'll just say DBAs, but certainly data integrators easier fit in there also, but DBA is just an easier term to say. Incidentally, what I'll also be doing is talking about certain vendors and certain products. Know that I just use them as example. If I say great things about Microsoft, say 10 minutes from now, I may say terrible things about them half an hour from now. I'm just using real examples. The reason is because, or real companies, because it's much more meaningful than saying, well, company X or database product B. So, but know that I have no hidden agenda trying to push you toward any product. But this is a really incredible time right now to be in IT. There are incredible megatrends that are really changing our industry. They include cloud computing, which, well, you'd sort of have to live in a cave in IT to not know quite what that is. However, it does mean different things to different people. Big data, data analytics, data visualization, which actually is tied, as are the two below it, into data, big data. The Internet of Things, which is basically machine-to-machine communication. And lastly, social media marketing and monitoring. Regarding cloud computing, and as I talk about these, I'm going to be talking about them specifically for the advantage of the DBA, well, and of course, Data Integrator. A fractured data model. What cloud computing has done, and I'm going to pick on a couple of products here, Salesforce.com, which actually is a product that my firm, Manager Mechanics, uses. Great product, but what has it done to us from a data perspective? It's pulled all of the client and CRM-related data out of our organization, out of our core databases, inside our firewall, and put them in the cloud. And then let's say that you use Oracle for Oracle Financials. What does that do? Great product, but again, it is bringing your company's financial data then outside of the company. So from a data model perspective, what it's done is pretty much you have to be living with what their data models are, the size of the data fields, first name is at 10 characters, 20 characters, 25, whatever it happens to be is what it is. So what that does to us as DBAs is it fractures our data model, which means that we have basically data all over the place. And one of our roles, which is particularly roles to the data integration or data architect level, is how are we going to bring all that stuff back in and basically be able to move things to and from it in a way that makes sense. I'll give you an example. Let's say the CRM system, again I'll use, is Salesforce.com. And let's say that the accounting system is with Oracle. Now what happens is let's say that someone is not paying their bills. You're a manufacturing company, you're shipping product, the company is 120 days, the client is 120 days in arrears, and you'd like to get paid. Well, what happens is somehow the fact that the accounts receivable system sitting on the Oracle database is going to have to find its way into the CRM system over at Salesforce so that the salespeople know not to sell them more product. That's what I mean by a fractured data model. Excuse me. Next is the difficulty in passing data from cloud to cloud. There are no standards for passing data from place to place to place from these different cloud providers. What that means is that basically firms have to resort to what I like to call a hub and spoke type data model. All of the vendors you're using from a cloud computer perspective send data feeds into you. And then what you do is you take these data feeds, you figure out what goes where, and you ship them around. Now what happens is, in effect, that brings us to the next one, which is this significant data movement. So if you think about it as data-oriented professionals, we have data in movement, which is transactions and data files going from place to place, and databases, which is data at rest. The significant data movement could be related to having to run different types of job streams or queries related to Salesforce or Oracle or wherever it happens to be to bring them all here. It has to go through some type of manipulation, and then data has to be sent back out to these cloud providers to load their systems. The problem is they all do it differently. There's no standards, which again, the reason that that's an advantage for us as data-oriented professionals is, well, it keeps us busy, which is a good thing in today's economy. Next is data warehousing needs. Whereas data warehousing was always important, throughout the last, say, 20 or 30 years in IT, it's become doubly important now because in many cases, and again, I'm going to go to Salesforce, which I've been beating on it, but again, we use it. It's a great product. Is what happens is it used to be is that we could just go into the underlying data structures or databases of the specific system, into the locally built CRM system databases, et cetera, and pull data as needed. We can't do that anymore. Why? Because we no longer have the data under our administrative control. Big data. Now, the official technical word for big data is, well, it's wicked big data. I'm from New England, so, actually the word wicked is a good thing. But, with the sizes of this data, is that it needs to be managed. It needs to be moved from place to place. If you're a production DBA, you're continually having to monitor disk space. You're continually having to make sure that that indexes are updated so that that the data can be accessed. The way someone asked me once is they said, Eric, actually they did say that, but they said, Eric, why do databases have to have these indexes, and why every weekend do we have to update them? I'm telling you this not because you don't know it, you certainly do, but you may actually like this story as a way to describe the importance and the need for indexing data. Well, what I said to them is I asked them, I said, well, let me begin by asking you a question. What's the difference in a kitchen? What's the difference between a blender and your garbage disposal? And they say, oh, that's really easy. I said, well, do they both blend what goes in it and mix it all up? And they said, yeah, of course it does. So I said, so what's the difference between the two? Well, with a blender, it keeps it in a place and makes it so you can use it. With a garbage disposal, it goes down the drain and it's gone. So how I tie that rather loose analogy to databases and data volumes is I say, well, that's sort of what happens to a database without indexes. You have the ability to keep putting stuff in it, like a garbage disposal, but the data gets so big that it becomes functionally impossible to pull it out and use it. So as a result of that, the bigger the data gets, the more creative we have to be as data people to be able to manage it. Which brings us to, and I'm going to jump right down to the last bullet here and then move back up, is Hadoop. Is that, we've been doing relational databases for a long time. We've done stored procedures. They could be, it's basically C# if you're in the Microsoft world. It's PL SQL if you're in the Oracle world. But now, what's happened now is for big data is that there's this whole new technology out there called Hadoop. Some of you may be familiar with it. For those who aren't, a great place to start is Wikipedia. But then from there, Hadoop is actually an open source software that's developed by the same open source consortium that built the LAMP structure. That's LAMP, Linux. Okay, I'm doing it in my head here. Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You think I'd know that because that's what our actually the Manager Mechanics websites and eLearning Plus platform are built on. But anyway, what it's done is with Hadoop and big data, for the first time in a long time, it's really given us on the database side a whole new technology to learn, to play with, to take advantage of in our companies, and quite frankly, to make money on. Now, also through this whole big data phenomenon, data has become enhanced value. Companies are looking at data like they never had before. Is that 3 pieces of data come in on their website. They first want to know how marketing can use it. Second of all, they want to know how they can sell it to other companies to have an additional sales stream behind the scenes. Big data is also used in really interesting ways. This will tie a little bit to the Internet of Things. But just in case you don't know this, is when you're driving down the highway and your Garmin GPS comes up with a flash that says traffic ahead. How do you think that Garmin knows that? What they're doing is that they're using the GPS locators on millions and millions of people's cell phones. So knowing the geo-coordinates, I'm in Massachusetts, so I'll pick on the Massachusetts Turnpike. So let's say that it knows the geo-coordinates of the Massachusetts Turnpike. If it sees the coordinates coming from people's cell phones that are on the Mass Pike and they're not moving and there's a huge collection of them at that single physical location, they know there's a traffic jam. If the cell phones that are on those physical coordinates are moving at 60 miles an hour, then they know there's no traffic jam. So you could just imagine the volumes of data that are being analyzed, many of which are real-time, to be able to do that type of statistical calculation. Next is textual social media data is collected. Now textual, what that basically means, and this will sort of tie in, again, we'll see it in a later slide related to social media marketing and monitoring. But basically what this is causing from an IT perspective is there's a huge turf war going on within IT right now, or within technology in a company between IT and the marketing people over who owns big data analytics, websites, and things along that line. This is a great place for you to be, actually, because of the value you can bring as a data-oriented professional. Next is data analytics. Now, data analytics has been around for a long time. You know, when you think of it, when data warehouses first came out, data analytics was actually looked at as the be-all and end-all for business intelligence and analyzing company data. Now, I'm going to tell you the original story about how business intelligence and database analytics really gained favor. Now, forgive me, I'm going to use some stereotypes in this example. I apologize of what was done. Is supermarkets used data analytics to figure out what combination of products were purchased together. And they came up with a seemingly unexpected result. I mean, they came up with millions of other results, but one result was extremely confusing and counterintuitive. And what it was is that there was a high percentage, early 80s, but of that time frame, and if their single purchase was diapers, the secondary purchase that went about you, but I had never mentally put together diapers and beer. What happened is when the grocery stores did some analysis on this to try to figure out what this combination was, what happened is when husbands were told to go to the stores to buy diapers for their kid on the way home from work, they also picked up a 6-pack of beer. So it was a weird combination that they were able to realize. So what did they do? Some of the stores actually moved the diapers to the end, or right next to the refrigerated shelves, so that when men went in to pick up diapers on their way home from work, they'd see right there all the beer, and they'd pick up an extra 6-pack or 2. So again, forgive me for the stereotypes in it, but that's the types of things that historically tied in with data mining. Now, data comes into us in 2 formats, structured and unstructured data. In fact, it's funny, you can break anything into 2 types. Like, for example, do you know that there are 3 types of people in this world? Those that are good in math and those who aren't. But anyway, I thought you'd find that joke interesting. But anyway, structured data is data that comes in and cleanly fits in to a database or a comma delimited or fixed length record. Basically, this is the last name field. It's 20 characters in length. Unstructured data is basically things within blogs, textual-based data. It could be data contained in PowerPoint presentations, Word, things along that line. We now, as DBAs, what we need to do is we're getting a higher and higher percentage of unstructured data that needs to be analyzed. And it's our jobs, which again is part of the reason they need us, is to be able to find a way to store that efficiently so that it can be used appropriately in macro and micro predictive analytics. Now, what the difference between them is macro predictive analytics is, for example, the story that I said about beer and diapers, is that they know that people in general who bought this will buy that. People whose credit cards are purchasing these particular types of products have probably just bought a house. So, for example, if on your credit card it shows that you have been three trips to Home Depot, 2 trips to Bed Bath & Beyond, and then a trip to Home Goods, chances are you're upgrading or purchased a new home or something like that. If for the first time you're seen buying or a preponderance of baby products, then probably someone in the home is expecting. You know, this is analytics that they do, and that's at a macro level, saying that if people who did this may also be interested in that. Now, micro-predictive analytics, we see this all the time. What it is, imagine logging into Amazon. For example, we have a class, actually will soon be offered through New Horizons. We've already offered it, and it's actually quite fascinating. It's called The Steve Jobs Way, and how IT people can use his experience to their advantage. Again, the class is called The Steve Jobs Way. But from that is I went out, as you can expect, and we bought 2 or 3 books related to Steve Jobs. In fact, we're the sole training provider for the books, The Steve Jobs Way, and oh, what's the name of his other book? That's funny. I'm going blank. Oh yeah, Leading Apple with Steve Jobs. They were written by Jay Elliott. So I went out and bought those 2 books and a couple of others on Amazon, because I'm working with Jay on it. Well, do you know, from Amazon, all of a sudden I started getting advertisements for books, other books on Steve Jobs, for books saying people who bought this book also bought that book. I started getting advertisements related to Bill Gates and other sort of senior IT executives related to Apple products. What that is that's micro-predictive analytics. If I bought book A, then maybe I'm going to buy book B. Again, from a data perspective, these things require enormous computer power behind the scenes and well-structured data. Textual analytics falls into that also, in the fact that I'm going to tell you about a company I know of. It's in Cambridge. It's either in Cambridge. It's in Boston, the Boston area. And what it is, the name of the firm is Crimson Hexagon. And what they do is they get a data feed of every tweet that everyone does. So what's that, 500 million tweets a day, something like that? And what they do is, for clients, is they analyze that data looking for specific trends and things along that line. Now, I was told, and by the way, these were not clients of the firm I just mentioned. There are like 6 firms that do this. I don't know which one who did this thing I'm about to tell you. But both the Democratic and Republican Party during their last conventions were doing sentiment of what people were tweeting about the convention in live time. They were getting this data back, and they were using that to slightly modify their messages as the conventions went on. Again, Democrat, Republican, I'm not making a political statement here. They're both very smartly doing it as part of their brand marketing. Now, the next is that I don't know if you've heard of the new job title called data scientist. What the data scientist role is basically it's what we've been doing a long time. It's companies people who analyze data, statisticians, people who have heavy math backgrounds doing analytics on this data. People in general in those roles are trying to raise the idea that, well, you're not just a data statistical person, you are a data scientist. So if you fall into sort of that loose category of heavyweight data analytics, whether it be SPSS on these, SAS, you know, with 1A, you know, the SPSS equivalent owned by the University of Toronto, or other products related to that. If you're doing heavy predictive and macro and micro predictive analytics, look into the job title data scientist, because if you're a scientist, that means you should be paid more. Oops. Next, data visualization. Data visualization has been around for a long time, so I'm not going to spend too much on this one, but understand in your role as keeper of the data, a great way to expand yourself professionally is to really analyze all of the tools that are out there that can really do great drill down, great graphical capabilities, things along that line. Because if your data is sitting in a relational model, you know, just what you can do is bring multidimensional capabilities on top of that and provide some really incredible analytical tools for those using the data. And then the beauty of it is once the tools are connected, it's the users who drive it. Like, for example, in Microsoft SQL Server, the reporting analytics tool, I'm going blank on its name now, I think it's reporting analytics. But anyway, is an incredibly powerful tool to be able to do drill down and integrate into the data. You can it dynamically builds the SQL statements to drive down into pieces of data. Or what you can do is it can create denormalized tables in certain areas to bring together certain types of information. They're phenomenal tools. You want to be a thought leader within the data community at your company? Start analyzing these tools. Bring them in. You can bring in most of them, for free if they're web-based, or download versions of them that you can use for review for 30 days or so, and just see how it goes. We're going to see that term, by the way, thought leader, again before our webinar ends. Next, the Internet of Things. This is a term that's been around for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I guess, and it's really gaining in popularity. What it really is at the end of the day, it's machine-to-machine integration. It's where one device is talking to another device. I have 4 examples of it here. You see, car, webinar, smartphone, and refrigerator. Boy, that's sort of a wide set of stuff, for lack of a better term. But let's go through those one at a time. 2 ways that cars are using it. There's actually some research being done now to help for collision control, where cars will be able to anticipate what the cars around them are doing based on coordinates being pulled out from the the driver. Like, for example, if the directional go on the car next to you goes on, what it's going to do is, in time, there will be a display on your dashboard that says, caution, person cutting into your lane, that kind of stuff. The other way is that I think I'm going to get the companies wrong, but I know the study was done. And what it was BMW and Starbucks. And what happened is because the BMWs had the ability to the geo-tracking devices in them, either by the cell phones of the people who own BMWs, or for things in the car related to the GPSs integrated into their dashboards. And what they found, or what someone found for them, that there was that people who owned BMWs very, very often when shopping bought coffee at Starbucks. How would they know this? Because when they're following the geolocators of either the phones or the cars of people in BMWs, they know physically where the Starbucks are. And if a car stops on high percentage in front of different Starbucks, then chances are they're going in and getting coffee. Now, how can Starbucks use this information? They can use it basically to do BMW advertising, to have BMW pay Starbucks to do advertising in their stores. Why? Because, hey, if you don't own a BMW yet, but if you're shopping at, buying coffee at Starbucks, maybe you're a potential purchaser of their cars. Next, websites. Everything, for a long time, weblogs were created. Now, all right, let's be honest here. What did we all do with the weblogs when they filled up the hard drives on our web servers? We truncated them, or we put them on a mag tape or some backup digital device and put it where we would never see it again. The reason is because it was too big for us to do anything with it. That's where products like Hadoop, or technologies, I should say, like Hadoop, are allowing now the analysis on these huge volumes of data. The next is your smartphone. The first example that I'll use there is the one that I mentioned before for knowing is there a traffic jam on the Mass Pike. It's also being used for an enormous amount of other things. In fact, that's why every time you bring an app down to your smartphone, what do they ask you for? They ask you for access to everything but the kitchen sink to provide better service to you. They're selling that data behind the scenes to different vendors, to different organizations. If you're running Angry Birds on your iPhone, and you're also running some other type of game from another vendor, and they see a trend, guess what? They're going to go to that vendor and say, hey, you know what? 85% of the people using Angry Birds, secondly, will have your machine on it. or let me say 80, the other way around actually, 85% that have your game also have Angry Birds. Why don't we market to people who have phones that are running Angry Birds on it? And they're using the data there. Last of all, your refrigerator. How's that for a high-tech item? Well, you know what is, how many of your refrigerators have water filters in them? We have a Frigidaire at my home, and we have a water filter in it, and then it runs through some specified number of gallons, through the filter, and then what happens is the filter turns, the little light inside the refrigerator turns from green to yellow and then yellow to red, which means that I have to buy a new filter. Okay? Now, what all of the newer refrigerators, to be honest, I don't know if this is in my refrigerator or not. I really don't know the answer to this. But what's happening is they're putting the equivalent of little cell phones in your refrigerators. So what happens is that when my water filter turns from green to yellow, it automatically calls out through the cell phone network to Frigidaire and informs them that I need a new water filter. So what happens is, all of a sudden, I get a phone call or I get a piece of mail about how important it is to keep your water filter up to date with, interestingly enough, a reorder form. Now, from a data perspective, from our profession, this is of enormous value to us to know this stuff because we know what data is there. We're the one who maybe normalized the databases, built the data warehouses. You should be trying to think outside the box of the data that your firm is collecting. How can you use that to your company's and your professional advantage? Next, social media. There are two types of social media that are really, the way it's being used. One of which is content-based marketing, and the other one is social media monitoring. I'll give you a beautiful, wonderful example of content-based marketing. This webinar. What is it? I mean, at the end of the day, is we are providing, I hope you believe, an enormous amount of real value that you can use professionally at no cost, with the idea that you'll think New Horizons is a great vendor and that we're a great content provider. And gee, wouldn't it be great for you to sign up for our classes now that you've sort of had a taste of our level of ability through New Horizons? That's what context-based marketing is. That's why, for those of you with your own businesses, are told, write a blog. It brings your search engine optimization up in Google and other search engines, and it gives the people interested in what you do a taste of your ability. Now, from a data perspective, the content-based marketing, there's an enormous amount of content management work that goes on behind the scenes. Who clicks on what reports are up there, what data is available, etc. So all of that data has to be managed. Social media marketing, monitoring, what that is, that's also actually called active listening. And what that is that's tying back to that example. I said about Twitter. And that all of that data being brought in needs to be stored, it needs to be analyzed. In the cases of companies like Crimson Hexagon, they do it for you because it's just too big for companies to manage this stuff on their own. It wouldn't be cost effective. But the thing is that, think of it this way, is not only is there opportunities for you as DBAs within IT, but there's an enormous amount of these monitoring type companies, social media monitoring firms that are popping up, which need, among other things, great DBAs, data integrators, data normalizers, and production database administrators. Is that data has become very, very, very big business. All right, we've talked about a number of different IT megatrends and at a high level sort of what that means to you as data-oriented professionals. Now what I'm going to suggest is that as the next step, what we need to do is we really need to do some personal analysis. We're doing sort of the micro analysis for us. These are questions that are going to be for you specifically. All right, it's cool that Hadoop is out there and there's lots going on with social media. But it's time for you to turn on in this webinar, radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me? Question number one, or analysis number one for you, is when you look inside your company, wherever you're working right now, is what are the current activities in your firm related to the 6 megatrends that we just discussed. And the question that's really for you to be asking yourself here is, well, actually at this point is that what are they? What's going on in big data? Are you working for a firm like Frigidaire that's now starting to collect all this information coming in from refrigerators? Are you working for a firm like AAA who potentially has lots of data related to where cars break down and why they break down and how that could be used to potentially push other products? Are you working at Starbucks supporting the marketing group and trying to figure out ways to find out other firms that you can be using to do co-marketing with based on customer activities that use Starbucks and something else? What's going on in your firm where your skills could be of value? Next is what's being planned at your company. Maybe, are you hearing stirrings that there's going to be a big data project related around Hadoop, and they're doing analysis on that? Do you hear that the company, is going to be outsourcing 3 or 4 different types of products? The company, you may know, say, for example, has no data warehouse. So all of a sudden you start talking internally about data warehousing. You know how that stuff works, for example. What can you do by learning about what your company's plans are with the thought, and we'll be getting to that soon as we move into sort of the execution mode, the next step of this. But, do some intelligence. Look up and see what's going on around you. There may be incredible opportunities within your firm 3 cubes down related to any one of these current industry trends. And question 3. What's going on in your industry? We've talked about a number of things going on at IT in general. But let's say you're in financial services. Or let's say that you're working in the healthcare industry. I'll pick on healthcare for a minute because it's been in the press so much and there's so much going on there. Well, you know what? Things related to automated patient records. There are huge, huge technical implications of implementing this stuff in hospitals, in insurance companies, in third-party providers, in small consortiums of physician practices. How can you use your skill sets associated with things going on in your specific industry? If you're in financial services, there's new regulations that are coming down. There are, they use financial services. Actually, I'm from financial services as a background. Has an enormous amount of data analytics, data movement, and one piece of data that's wrong in a security master file can bankrupt your firm. You can bet that there's data quality assurance, data governance, things going on in that area. So by industry here, I don't mean IT. I mean going on in the industry related to the company that you work for. Okay, what we've done is 2 things, if you think about it, in this webinar. The first is we sat down and we went through what are all the megatrends, what are the things going on at a high level within IT as an industry. Then what I did was I said, let's blend that information on what's going on from technologically to what's going on in your business and industry. So now you have these 2 sort of wealths of information. Certainly what you've gained from me is a little bit of it, but there's a lot more to be gained. So this is where your homework, and of course I'm not going to know if you do it, but your homework is to analyze those last 3 questions. What's going on in your company, what's going to go on in your company, and what's going on in your industry that you can take advantage of professionally. So now let's do some analysis. Okay, the first bullet point I want you to look at here is the second from the bottom. What are your areas of interest? We've talked about lots of stuff. We've talked about, big data. We've talked about cloud computing. We've talked about data warehousing. We've talked about a multitude of new technologies, including Hadoop and all of these cool tools that allow for data analysis and data visualization. What floats your boat? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to be pivoting yourself or expanding your skill set to just increase your marketability and employability, it might as well be in something that you like. So what I'd like you to do is sort of, write down on the side of it. I mean, if all you get out of the webinar is, a couple of cool jokes and something to do for an hour, then, you're not getting as much out of this as you could. Use this to, when the webinar ends, to be a little introspective of where opportunity knocks for you. So what are your interests? From there is look at the things we've previously said based on your interests. What's going on in your company now? What's planned to? What's going on in your organization? And then the fourth bullet point here is based on all that stuff and based on your personal interests. How do your skills match up to these opportunities? And what must you learn to take advantage of them? Let's say you love this big data, you love analytics, but you know absolutely nothing about Hadoop. It's really time for you to take a class in it. We'll be talking a little bit about those actually under executing your plan. But this is important stuff for you. I can't tell you how to do this. I can't tell you what your areas of interest are. But if you don't know them yourselves, have a cup of coffee, sit back, maybe at Starbucks, in your BMW. But anyway, sit back and think about it. Do some personal career planning. We as technologists do planning and analysis for people all the time. Do it for yourself. Next is where are you positioned? How are you positioned? What's your personal brand? Let's say your name is Joe. I don't know. I always pick on a Joe. If there is a Joe on the line, I don't mean you, but hi, Joe. But let's say your name is Joe. Okay? Joe. When people think of Joe, what do they think about? Do they think that do they think that he's hardworking? Do they think that he's brilliant technically? Do they think that he's a thought leader because he really knows what's going on in the industry? Is he willing to help people that, let's say Joe is an expert in normalizing databases or PL SQL or monitoring data volume growth related to increased data or any one of a million topics? Is Joe willing to help others and provide thought leadership and help and technical mentoring or not? Is Joe thought of or are you thought of as the kind of person who will take on new technologies and learn them? Or if a manager is sitting out there saying, gee, been hearing a lot about this Hadoop thing. You know what? I bet Joe knows. Are you that person? If not, it's of enormous professional value and career value to become that person. So think about this is from what we've gone through, just the information, the questions that were asked, dig a little bit into these trends, go back and just find out the piece of, hey, what's going on in the company and what's going on in the industry and blend them together. You can very easily, if you're willing to share your knowledge, become a force to be reckoned with as a growing or enhanced database professional in your own right. Now, from here, let's formulate a plan. Okay, you've done some analysis. What's next? All right, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. What and where to learn things. I have to tell you, one of the best places, the best bargain in town is MOOC. I'm going to give you an example of this, is that we at Managed Mechanics, we built our own e-learning platform. In fact, anyone who takes our classes, for example, the 3-day boot camps that I mentioned, you get that same material after you've taken the classes live in formalized e-learning format. We do that basically to make it easier for you, but give you a second look at the data from another perspective. But what we did with that platform, eLearning Plus, is we really wanted to enhance it with gamification. Points and levels and mastery and leaderboards and all that stuff. So one of the first things we did was we took a great MOOC class. MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Courses, or course. Took it from a company called Coursera, who provides many of these. And the gamification class was taught by, I can't remember the professor's name, but he was from University of Pennsylvania. And it was this huge class, me and 85,000 of my closest friends and relatives. And I learned an enormous amount just online, watching the videos, doing some of the assignments. And it was really the initial basis of the research that we did to integrate gamification into our e-learning platform. There's classes out there on MOOC, on data, on anything you can think of pretty much. And if they're not there, certainly you can find them on YouTube. Company-based, company-sponsored classes. You've seen a lot in Oracle. In fact, they're on the front page, bottom right corner of the Wall Street Journal virtually daily now, saying how they're moving into the cloud. I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to give you personal access to sort of a sandbox area that to learn more about what's going on there. Conferences in your local user groups, or internal subject matter experts within your own company where you can learn things. So, now that you've done this analysis, you know what you want to learn, go for it. Here are free ways, and certainly in addition to, say, New Horizons, teaches great technical classes. Presumably you're on the line is because a firm of yours is a client of New Horizons. We teach IT leadership stuff, but there's lots of other stuff that they offer around database administration, PL SQL, Java programming. Pick a topic. They probably offer a class. Next, sharing your knowledge internally. This is of enormous importance. It used to be, the concept that knowledge was power. Well, I'm going to extend that in today's world, because knowledge isn't power anymore. There's no question that I couldn't be answered about a piece of data, a date, a time, a person, that I couldn't get off my Google, by running Google on my cell phone in 30 seconds. In fact, if I have an iPhone, I could use Siri, and I don't even have to type. I could just say, hey Siri, who was the President of the United States in 1831, and poof, I'll get an answer back. All right? The power is not in having knowledge. It's in sharing it. It's being able to assimilate it and bring value to it in its aggregate. So you, in building your professional brand, as a data professional, should be willing to share it within your department, across IT in general. If you know the flow of data, your major systems, think about it for a moment. There's probably half a dozen systems. You could probably count them on one hand. I know that's 5, not 6. But on one hand, you can probably count the main systems that are in your company. Pick an industry, doesn't matter. If you understand the data flow from the time data comes into the company through these major systems to how it exits the company, then you not only understand the general data process of how things move through the company, you understand your company's business because you can track a business's process and function through the movement of the data through its systems. And it gives you it can let you make educated guesses and a good idea on what data is smaller systems are feeding that data and where that data is going to for ancillary systems and how it can better connect. Tying back to the megatrends, that's an enormous advantage for you as your, back to the first slide, is your data architecture gets fractured as cloud computing is implemented. Or as huge chunks of data are coming in because of the Internet of Things, how data and information gleaned out of that can be integrated into your internal systems in a meaningful and, quite frankly, profitable way. So you should be able to be providing this knowledge and thought in your department, across IT, and through your company in general. And if you do, it can provide enormous career advantages for you professionally. Also, don't underestimate the internal power at your company of you becoming a known external entity. Build your own website. In fact, I'm going to say to everyone here, if you don't have your name as a website, you know, like for me, you know, Eric, actually I didn't get the P, Eric P. So I'm ericp.bloom. I have that site. I don't use it a lot, but I own it. I couldn't use Eric Bloom because actually, for anyone who's old enough to remember the band Blue Oyster Cult, their lead singer is named Eric Bloom. It took me probably 2 years as a nationally syndicated columnist to get my name above the fold in Google. But anyway, is start your own website. Write a blog. Join one of the open source initiatives. You know, let's say, for example, as a database professional, is you have an interest in MySQL. You know, that's one of the primary databases you use. You know what? That's an open community. Is if you get involved in the open source MySQL community to, you know, help test new versions and maybe help design new specific features in it, think about that. Next time you go applying for a job internally at your firm or externally, and then they say to you, "Oh, are you familiar with MySQL?" And you say to them, "Well, actually, I'm on the open source I'm a member of the open source consortium for it, and I helped write the code for their latest released version." That is one awesome credential. Same thing goes with Hadoop. I'm sure that they're looking for programmers all the time to help with it. That one might be sort of full because it's gotten so popular, but think about it from that perspective. Participate in discussion boards. Why? Because you learn a lot by hearing the problems that other people have with the technologies, and it'll give you new insights as you go try to answer those questions. And by the way, in answering those questions, you're documenting industry-wide that you really know what you're talking about. So you do that stuff, poof, a call comes out of the blue offering you an opportunity that you never would have gotten because they found you because you really answered a great question on the discussion boards. Write ebooks, white papers, you know, get involved in LinkedIn discussions, or do a technical YouTube video. You know, all of those things are open to you. You know, as technologists, the one caution that I'll give you, if you are working for a firm, make sure in doing these things that, in fact, you do not violate any company policies in doing so. Just a word to the wise, some companies are very particular about what their employees do outside of the office place related to their profession. But anyway, that said, is many of these should be very available to you. From here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just tell you to enjoy the wave. You know, it's a great time, as you've seen, to be a DBA and or a data integrator. You know, there's so much going on. There's so much to learn. Data has really risen to the consciousness of the business world, and people who know how to manipulate it can absolutely take great advantage. So enjoy the ride. From here, I'd just like to say thank you for being on today's webinar. And I'd like to remind you of the free webinars we have coming up in March and April, as well as the IT leadership classes coming up also within March and April. So from here, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to thank you for being on the line with us today. If there are any questions, please feel free to unmute your phones and come on. Should you want to have any questions that you'd like to ask me directly, I can be reached at eric.bloom, that's eric.bloom, B-L-O-O-M, at managermechanics.com. And if you have questions on any of these classes, you can contact us, but also certainly please contact your New Horizons representative. They can provide you information on our class, as well as many of the other classes that they offer through other quality providers, I'll say, well, like us. But anyway, thank you. Have a great day, and we really appreciate you being on the line with us.